Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which finally sees the last of the major summer releases in Disney's MCU's Fantastic Four First Steps. A lot is riding on this movie, as this is set to set the stage for the future of the MCU, which has been on a downward turn, with two box office flops this year in both Thunderbolts and Captain America Brave New World. There is much speculation as far as what they think this movie is going to be able to accomplish, and as of right now, the early indication is it's actually tracking well for a release in 2025. And again, when you compare this to other films released from the MCU, this is not going to be breaking any records. This is not going to be setting the stage for really anything that should be taken as all the bad things are over, we're going in the right direction here. But it's definitely a positive sign at the very least. And what's most interesting to me is that this is actually right now set to have a better opening weekend, potentially domestically, and maybe even also globally, up against Superman, James Gunn's Superman film. As of right now, the Thursday estimates coming out, this is the report coming out from the studios, is that Fantastic Four First Steps made around $24+ million in its Thursday preview numbers. So these are just coming in as of this morning, and that's a pretty decent number there. This is still nothing compared to the previous releases. Of course, good old Tony over at Deadline, he loves to make comparisons without adjusting for inflation or looking at average ticket prices. Really nothing that can actually give you an idea of the scale of how well or not well something is actually doing. But it is, I think, worth noting that when it comes to the comparison between this and James Gunn's Superman, this film right now is tracking to have a better opening. Now, again, according to his own estimates, he still says, Tony, that $100 to $110 million is what they are expecting, and what they are overall projecting the total domestic box office opening is going to be for this movie, which obviously would be much lower than the $125 million made by Superman. However, this film had a better debut, right? $24.4 million. That is a lot higher than the roughly $22 million that was made by Superman. What's even more interesting about that is that when you look at the numbers for Superman, that is including the Wednesday Amazon Prime preview number. So it had kind of a double advantage there, where it had not only just the early screening on Wednesday, but it was also that Prime exclusive, which they made a couple of $1 million from. And so what this tells us is that if that is where the comparison is, if this is currently doing higher numbers than that of Superman, which had that extra day advantage, hey, right now it seems likely, and it, again, doesn't really seem out of the expectations for the film to be able to match the total domestic opening of Superman, which again opened $125 million. So it's interesting that they're still holding to the $100 to $110 million. I'm pretty sure that's exactly where they were when Superman first came out, and then it came in well over those projections because, as we all know, people like Tony, they love to do what people like Tony like to do. So we'll go ahead and look at some other box office projections of what others are thinking will probably happen. And again, the fact that this is right now doing better than Superman's opening does seem to indicate that, hey, they might actually be right about this one. They were definitely overestimated for Superman when that first came out, but that film also ended up being still higher than your so-called industry experts. And so I do think that is still something that is worth noting as well. So as far as the domestic turn at the box office, right, the total being projected by the trades and the mainstream media is $100 to $110 million. Go over to Box Office Theory, which we usually start off with here. He's being pretty bullish on this, as he typically is, and he's projecting $136 million in opening. Now, he also had been projecting $25.5 million in Thursday preview numbers. And so now that we have those numbers, we can already see, okay, it's probably not going to be 136. Right, it still got pretty close, right? It's still about $24+ million in the Thursday preview numbers, and that's still, again, better than what Superman's was. But with that being said, it is likely going to still trend very, very well. And so will it match up the $37.3 million on Friday, $39 million on Saturday, and so on and so forth? Again, time only will tell. We'll find out on Sunday, and we'll do our full box office breakdown at that point. But $136 million is what he is estimating for this movie. Now, this, of course, is the average. His total range for the film is between 125 and 145. And so he's pretty confident, it seems, that this will be a better opening than Superman. And again, the fact that your opening day numbers, right, Thursday to Thursday, in the case of Superman, it's Wednesday and Thursday Superman versus just the Thursday of Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four has the advantage, and so that's already a pretty good sign. Now, we also have to remember that when it comes to MCU films, when it comes to Marvel films, they are typically front-loaded, and so that's why that number still might be higher. And therefore, on the first day, it's beating Superman. But when it comes to the Friday and Saturday and Sunday numbers down the stretch, it might actually end up being law of diminishing returns because MCU, superhero, bad movie fatigue, right? Really more so bad movie fatigue that happens to be in these genres is much more the culprit in this case. But we won't really know until we find out the Friday numbers and Saturday numbers and, of course, get those Sunday estimates in. But as of right now, it's actually looking to do pretty well at this point. And so Fantastic Four could actually end up having a better opening in its domestic. Now, as far as the internationals are concerned, this is going to the Duel article done by Tony and Nance over on Deadline. So initially, they were projecting 190 to 210 million in the global opening. And so, again, talked about this on the live stream this past Wednesday. But essentially, it's been projected at the very beginning to be $100 to $110 million domestic and $90 to $100 million international. So that would actually put it right at the same level as Superman. Now, the difference, though, is whereas with Superman making $95 million in its international debut, had a significantly higher domestic total, and that separation has continued on, right, that kind of backwards way, typically a global release, to be a huge success, not just at the box office, but also financially, right, as far as return on investment. Usually you'll see for a bigger movie, a much larger share coming from your internationals and a good or bad number coming from your domestics. And right, in the case of Superman, it's doing most of its money here in the United States. It's about a 60-40 split in the wrong direction for typical releases. Basically, a lot more money is available overseas. And so if your percentage is higher domestically, it means you're leaving a lot of money on the table. So if the numbers come out as right now they are being projected, we could see something similar happen for this. But what I do think is going to happen is that the MCU, Marvel, also, the fact that this movie does have pretty good word of mouth at this point in time. Superman also did too. I guess the difference is that whereas Superman had a big James Gunn problem, this film has an MCU problem. This film has a Disney problem. And again, which is going to be the bigger problem? Honestly, I think the James Gunn thing was a bit more polarizing. If you go to the Critic List score, again, shout out to Critic List, love that site, you'll notice that, hey, even though it is very divisive in both camps, right, for both of those movies, right now, Fantastic Four has a much higher score, right? It's in the rad territory, whereas, Superman was still rocking in the decent category. So again, very, very close, and I do think it's still going to be divisive. People are going to disagree. Overall, I thought the film was decent. I did think it was a little bit better than Superman because at least it was more tonally, consistent. But it had plot issues, right? Just like with Superman. And again, also it came with that issue of why do I care about any of these characters in the modern MCU when, again, it does your typical MCU fare of decisions when it comes to your character motivations and as far as character arcs. It's like, okay, I already know what you've done in the past. I can see where you're trying to go in the future, and it's just really not all that interesting at the end of the day. So will that kind of fatigue, that malaise carry over? Again, only time will tell. But again, good start right now for it, and we'll watch that separation between domestic and international, because if something similar happens with this movie as it did for Superman, it'll have the same problem. However, if the word of mouth does well, if it actually overperforms in the international markets, again, we won't have full numbers on the international markets yet, it is still getting a full global release this weekend, so we will know with a lot of surety and a lot of certainty what this film will do down the line by the end of this weekend. But if it is able to get better numbers international, open up strong domestically too, and open to 220, 250 maybe even worldwide, I mean, we're getting in the 250 territory with the higher international market coming in. It'll be a lot better situation for this, and also there'll be the potential for this film to end with a higher box office than Superman, which I don't think anyone was expecting. No, most of us, when we were talking about, early in the summer, what's going to win the box office, almost everyone universally said, okay, Jurassic World, even though it's probably going to be a terrible movie, and it is, it's still going to make a lot of money because people love dinosaurs. People love CGI. Dinosaurs on screen destroying stuff, that's just something people enjoy. They don't really care about the story or anything like that. They just want to see big stuff getting blown up and eaten. That's just, again, the way people enjoy films these days. But I do think that it is worth noting most people were still like, yeah, it's probably still going to win. And then there was a debate over Superman or Fantastic Four, but most people had Fantastic Four in the number 3 slot. If this is the starting point, if it actually is doing better, and again, right now all we have are the first opening day numbers, and again, it's still an advantage to Fantastic Four. If that advantage continues on, it'll be very good news for Fantastic Four, and jury's still out on Superman because, again, it's making a lot of money domestically, but now that there's competition, will it cut into it? They'll be losing their premium format screens too. So is this the position where Superman starts to not make money anymore, like when it starts to just get basically start to leave theaters almost? I still think it has quite a bit left in the tank, at least domestically. But internationally, that's going to be the big thing, right? If we see a massive drop-off internationally because people are more interested in the new MCU fare, that could be a very bad sign for Superman going forward. So going to that number here on the box office theory website, it has 23.5 million domestic. So he's seeing a pretty stark drop off, 60% in the third week of release for Superman. So again, numbers that we'll be following there. That will definitely not be on the positive side, right? Jurassic World Rebirth has been seeing 40s for the last several weeks, after having an initial, plus 50% drop. So Superman had a very strong hold in its second weekend, but now that it's got some competition and it's losing those premium format screens, it's being projected right now to lose some of that. So we'll have to wait and see. We have also the box office report numbers here, $131 million being reported in their overall predictions for Fantastic Four. So if that happens, again, that will be better than the Superman numbers. That would be a very big thing. And they're only seeing a 54% drop being projected for Superman. So will that happen? We'll have to wait and see. They're having the total be for Superman by the end of the weekend be around $291 million. It will be around $287 million according to Box Office Theory's projections. That is going to be a very important number because right now it seems to be tracking to potentially get upwards of $350 million domestically. However, because it's doing so badly internationally, it's not likely going to make that much more than it already has there. And because of that, that means that its worldwide total is going to be capped off quite a bit. And it's probably going to be one of the better performing films of the year, but only really domestically and not globally. We'll have to wait and see exactly what that separation is. Financially, it's better for them to make more money domestic because they get more return on investment. But again, still too early to tell at this point in time. Going over to Box Office Pro, they also have some pretty interesting numbers here. They're also projecting 115 to 135, so they are typically a bit more tepid. They're typically a bit, not as bullish as those other sites are, and so they're actually lowballing it a bit, I think, 115 to 135. So that would include your typical industry trades, but then also include even part of that range going up to a 135. Based on the current tracking, that would mean, if it follows what the numbers are here, right, if it's coming in better than the expectations for your Thursday opening, that, yeah, you would probably expect it to be closer to 120, maybe even 125, right? Still a little too early to tell, but still really good numbers nonetheless. Superman expected to make 14% of the market share, $26 to $32 million. So pretty similar numbers there compared to those other charts there. Number 3 film, once again, being Jurassic World Rebirth, which is still holding on quite a bit. Going over to thenumbers.com, we obviously have this comparison. This was from the other day, basically talking about how, Superman is doing fine as an individual release, but in comparison to other films that have been released in the DC universe, in this comparison game that we have going on here, it hasn't been nearly as good, right? It's been doing some pretty good numbers there during the week on Tuesdays, on Thursdays. But as you can see, 264 is where the film currently stands. Man of Steel at the same point of release when you adjust for inflation, because again, that's the only way to keep it fair. Whether you're doing that or ticket sales, it's going to tell the same story. 316 million is where that film was. Guardians 3 was actually on the lower end at 242. The Batman was at 282, so had that advantage there. And then 239, adjusted for inflation, is where the Batman Begins was. Some people have been bringing that up in comparisons. I don't really think that's a fair comparison because we're talking about Christopher Nolan's name finally getting a lot of worldwide recognition by general audiences. Right up to that point, people were Nolan fans, but people didn't really on a global scale know necessarily who he was. Batman's what really put him on the global map and has put him in the position where he can tell studios to go screw themselves, that he can go and say, hey, it's going to be my way or the highway, and that he has that kind of clout. It's because of how much money was made after the fact, right? Because of what he set aside. People really can't compare it to Batman Begins in the case of Superman because James Gunn is already established. It's not the same story, right? So you're trying to make the arguments there, but you're kind of ignoring a big piece of that puzzle, which is that people already know what they're getting with James Gunn. He makes the same style of movies and has been doing so for a long time. And hey, it's been working out pretty well for them. The last film, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, ended up doing a lot better than anyone could have expected. The difference, though, is Guardians had a international presence, whereas Superman does not. So don't expect it to get 874 or anywhere near that Guardians number. We're looking at this film worldwide currently at 437. So again, going to be north of $500 million by the end of its run. But we're looking probably somewhere between 6 and 700 million, really depending on just how bad that international number is. This weekend will tell us quite a bit. Going over the charts, because we love charts here on OMB Reviews. Again, we're still waiting on full numbers for Fantastic Four, but what we do know, in quotation marks, is that they are telling us the film cost only $200 million to make. Now, I say it that way because, as you all know, Disney especially, of all the studios, is notorious for floating out fake numbers, right? 200 million is almost a standard. It's amazing how they're always able to say, oh yeah, it cost $200 million. Wait, every film you've released the last 5-10 years have all been exactly $200 million? That's amazing. Well, thanks to the work of people like Caroline Reed over on Forbes.com, she's been able to, especially all the productions that they've done overseas in the United Kingdom, they've been able to say, hey, let's look at your tax files, let's look at your tax returns, because you have to file them and you have to list your total production budget in order to get the tax rebates there. We can know exactly how much they've been spending on these movies. And in almost every single case, every tax filing we've ever gotten, it's always been at least 100 million more than what they told us, than what they told the trades, than what the trades were reporting. So based on that standard, I would assume then this film probably costs closer to $300 million before you actually account for marketing. Now, again, we're going to run with the numbers that they have. Hopefully there are some leaks. Hopefully there are some more accurate reporting coming out on these budgets as it goes along. But basically, this film still has to be a huge, massive hit, massive success to make its money back. Very similar situation to what was going on with Superman, with the big difference being, I think Superman cost about as much, if not more, than what Fantastic Four did because, again, of that budget and all the nonsense that's being reported about as far as how much that film actually cost. But I digress. The fact is, Fantastic Four still costs quite a bit of money to make, and this film needs to make a lot back. We also know Disney always spends a heck of a lot more on marketing than your typical marketing ad spend. So this total marketing, total cost, probably closer to $400-500 million at the end of the day. But again, we're going to run with the numbers that we have right here. So based on these numbers, again, if it opens up to north of $200 million, that means, getting to $600 million is going to be on the table. Most films end up making 3 times their entire global box office by the end of their run, if they have an average run at the box office. So will that happen for Fantastic Four? Seems like it's going in that direction, at least at this point in time. We also have, again, these updated numbers here. Smurfs is not really doing much of anything, which is not really that much of a surprise. I Know What You Did Last Summer, about $12 million in the red, also not doing much of anything. Because of its $18 million budget, it doesn't have much to make back, which is why it doesn't look as bad as some of these other ones on there. Eddington, another Pedro Pascal movie, not doing much of anything. James Gunn Superman, as I said, right now tracking to probably get pretty close, if not to cross $500 million this weekend. So that would be, again, a pretty good number to be at. Still has a long way to go, though. So will it hit that number? We really don't know yet. Right now, around $170 million in the red for that film's release. Jurassic World Rebirth is profitable, but again, seemingly slowing down at only $676 million. I do think that this film will probably be able to leg out between $700 and $800 million. That would be about right. The last films were all able to make $1 billion, with the last one barely making $1 billion. This film is still doing a lot of money overseas, and so we'll see exactly what the full total is once those internationals update on Sunday. But yeah, right now, I think right now the most precarious movie out there is James Gunn's Superman. And that's not just me saying that. It's because Rebirth was already beating it in certain international markets, even though they have a different of release, right? James Gunn Superman came out after Jurassic World Rebirth. And so you would think Superman would have that advantage as the newer film, but in its opening weekend, it was already losing to Rebirth in markets that had already been having that film for at least a couple weeks. So that tells us the strength of Jurassic World, maybe, the weakness of Superman, probably more so because those are very weak international numbers that we've been having, coming in. But again, only time will tell. Fantastic Four, it'll be interesting to see where these films end up. As you can see, that $24.4 million number has officially now gone in. So a long ways to go, but definitely a good start for Fantastic Four. And it'll be interesting to see exactly where that all starts off. Again, momentum is the key, and we won't know for sure until all the numbers actually come out. Again, as an individual MCU film, this is not the biggest of numbers, but it's, again, a game of comparisons. We played the game of comparisons with Superman. We'll continue to do that for Fantastic Four as well. And between those two movies, right now, Fantastic Four seems to have the edge. But what do y'all think? Do you think Fantastic Four is going to have a bigger domestic opening? Do you think it's going to have a bigger global opening? Or do you think it's going to lose in every single count? Thursday numbers are all we have. If trends are to be believed, if history is to be believed, it would make sense for this film then to have the bigger domestic opening, but it's not guaranteed. And also internationally, it would not surprise me if the MCU was able to make a bigger splash than Superman did based on just how bad those international numbers really were for Superman in its opening weekend. Or will this also have a lot of struggles internationally, and will it be a sign that maybe the international audience is getting tired of the typical superhero comic book fare coming out of Hollywood. We'll have to wait and see. But let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button. Make sure you smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Friday. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.